Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to join, and then we will promptly get started. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are grateful for your attendance, and good evening. Welcome to LA County Assessor's Disaster Relief Webinar and Q&A session hosted by the Office of Assessor Jeff Prang. I am Special Assistant Kimberly Masse, and I will be today's moderator. This evening, you'll hear presentations from LA County Assessor Jeff Prang, our participating county departments from the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office, from the Auditor Controller's Office, and from the LA Regional Planning Department. Please know that this webinar will be recorded and will live on our website for you to review at a later date or to share with your friends who are unable to be here today. Because this is a Q&A session, if you look at your screen, you'll see a Q&A function box. Please, throughout the presentation, feel free to drop in a question that you may have. And towards the end of our presentations, we will have the Q&A portion, which I will go ahead and read the questions that you proposed, and we will have them answered by our panelists. So again, feel free to ask any questions throughout. And without further ado, we will start with Assessor Jeff Prang, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, and good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this disaster relief webinar. My name is Jeff Prang, and I am the Los Angeles County Assessor. From Altadena to Pacific Palisades and other communities, our county has really experienced an unimaginable collective loss, and my office is doing all it can do to support property owners who are affected and ensure that everybody has access to disaster relief. As residents begin to rebuild their homes and businesses, we are here to provide information to help answer questions. I know that the property tax administrative system can be very, very complicated. So that's why we've brought together all the participating counties who have a piece of this system here in one place to answer your questions. I'm really grateful that we have our colleagues at the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office, the Auditor Controller's Office, and the Department of Regional Planning. And together, we're going to provide a comprehensive overview of available disaster relief pertaining to properties and answer your questions, I hope. To start, I hope that everybody has had an opportunity, who's been affected, whether your property was damaged or destroyed, had an opportunity to fill out what is called the Misfortune and Calamity form. You can fill it out in person at one of the disaster centers or online, including from your smartphone. This program provides temporary property tax relief at a lower rate, reflecting the damage or destruction from a natural disaster such as this fire. With this program, property assessments and the accompanying property tax bills will be lowered to reflect that damage until the rebuilding process begins. The basic qualifications for Misfortune and Calamity are: one, the damage has to exceed $10,000, and that includes smoke damage. And secondly, the claim needs to be filed within 12 months of the incident date, although I am currently sponsoring legislation that will extend that application period to 24 months. Once your Misfortune and Calamity form is filed, it is automatically transferred to the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, who will then defer your property taxes until a recalculated tax bill is processed. If you've already paid both of your installments of your 2024 property taxes, any reductions will result in a refund. If you have not yet paid your second installment, the one that's coming up in April, the Treasurer Tax Collector recommends that you do not pay it, but instead wait for a new tax bill reflecting the adjustment from the Misfortune and Calamity claim to be issued. For homeowners whose properties were not physically damaged, but whose market value has dropped significantly due to the disaster, you may qualify for another program called Decline in Value. This program allows us to lower the property's tax base if the economic value falls beneath its assessed value. This will also be applied to land value where appropriate. Current law does provide some challenges, as this program only applies to the assessed value of properties as of January 1st. And as you know, the fires occurred a week later, but I have also submitted legislation that, if adopted, will allow us to include fire-impacted properties on the January 1st, 2025 lien date. Additionally, the governor, as you may have heard, has issued an executive order that allows anybody in the affected zip codes to defer their property tax payments until April 10 of 2026. One of the questions that comes up quite a bit is we hear concern that property owners think they're going to be issued a new higher assessment as a result of rebuilding their property, and that is not the case. The very purpose of Misfortune and Calamity is to allow you to rebuild and then restore your previous Proposition 13 property tax base. Your property value will be lowered during the time that you're rebuilding. If your home was totally destroyed, then we will zero out the improvement value on your assessment, and it will be restored to its previous rate once your home has been rebuilt. A couple things to keep in mind: once the Misfortune and Calamity form is applied, the property value is not completely erased. While the structures or improvements, as we refer to them, may be damaged, the land beneath it still retains value, although we are currently determining whether or not a reduction in land value would be permitted. And we're looking to apply that as liberally as the law permits us. Once the structure is rebuilt, the property's original tax base prior to the disaster is reinstated. It's not increased to a new higher value, provided that the rebuilt structure is substantially equivalent to the original structure in its pre-damaged state. That means approximate size and continued use. There is a lot of confusion over some numbers that have been circulating, and I want to try to address some of those and clarify those at this point. You may have heard about the city and the county allowing property owners to rebuild to 110%. You may have heard about 120% of value from the assessor's office, and these are getting a lot of people confused. First, the 110% refers to an expedited rebuild permit review process ordered by the state and the county and cities. This is a different topic than the assessor's office standard of rebuilding and assessment. With my office, the Misfortune and Calamity Tax Relief Program looks at two standards when you rebuild from a natural disaster. The first one is you can rebuild to 120% of the pre-damaged property's value and substantial equivalence in size. This 120% of value, which is in the California Taxation and Revenue Code, compares the value of the property before and after the fire. It does not mean that you can rebuild up to 120% of the size that was previously on the site. It's really referring to the value that will change during the course of rebuilding. However, we do anticipate that due to rising costs of construction and age of affected homes, many property owners probably won't qualify for this particular component of Misfortune and Calamity. And quite candidly, we don't recommend it. It's not a particularly useful standard. The best standard for rebuilding is our standard Misfortune and Calamity program. Under this program, property owners may retain their tax base as long as your rebuild is to substantial equivalence, meaning similar size and use as before the fire. If you add any additions to the property, maybe you want to add another room or an ADU, those would be reassessed or would be assessed as new construction. One of the things I want to urge everybody to do is during this rebuilding process, and actually any homeowner in LA County should avail himself of this, is to sign up for our homeowner alert service and e-service account. You've probably heard there's a lot of scammers trying to take advantage of property owners. If somebody attempts to record something to create title fraud, under our old system, you may not even know that somebody attempting to commit fraud against your property until you get a letter in the mail from the registrar recorder letting you know that something's been recorded on your deed, such as a grant deed or a deed of trust. You can now go on our website and you can register your email with your property. And anytime something is recorded on your property, you will get an email alert within 48 hours. And if that recording is not something that you put there, there will be instructions as to how to report it to the authorities and try to stop that from moving forward. You can also sign up for our Assessor's e-service account, essentially create your own property profile on our website. It'll allow you to take advantage of some service such as changing a mailing address, letting us know where we can reach you in order to get additional information about your property. Changing your mailing address is really important because your tax bill goes to the mailing address in our records. If your home was destroyed, and you don't change your mailing address, it'll be difficult for your adjusted tax bill to get to you. And again, you can register that for that service on the main page of our website. So as my office continues our efforts to support property owners that are impacted by the fire, we're going to host an in-person disaster relief resource fair next Saturday, March 22nd, at the Duarte Community Center in the city of Duarte. You can meet us in person to hear presentations from my office and our community partners on the programs and resources that are available. Information is available on our website. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can write them down in the chat box, and some of our team will be responding to questions in that chat box in real time throughout the course of tonight's webinar. But I think we're going to offer you a lot of great information here this evening, and we are glad that you could join us and looking forward to answering your questions. Kimberly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Assessor Prang. We appreciate your presentation. All right, and next, we have a presentation from Sergio Marquez from the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office. Thank you, Sergio.
Good evening. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Assessor Prang. So my name is Sergio Marquez, Operations Chief over the LA County Treasurer and Tax Collector's Public Service Division. Next slide, please. Now, what is the role of the tax collector? Our role is essentially to bill and collect secured and unsecured property taxes. Our office mails annually over 2.5 million secured and unsecured property tax bills. On an average, we receive over 30,000 phone calls monthly, 2,200 one-stop visitors come to our office for self-service, questions and inquiries about various things. We also receive 1,500 online public inquiries and 1,500 mail pieces. So this is a daunting number of contacts that we get with the public, but we do this graciously and with the efforts to really be as responsive and accessible to the public. Now, when the wildfires occurred, our initial response was to create frequently asked questions and guidance for taxpayers about the Misfortune and Calamity claims. And we did this in conjunction with the assessor's office, and we really have a great partnership with their office as well as with the auditor controller. So the FAQs that we develop are very, very detailed and provide really good guidance on the importance of filing an M&C claim. In addition, we always want to remind taxpayers of the upcoming deadlines, like the April 10th installment deadline, which is our second installment for the secured property taxes, our August 31st deadline for the unsecured property taxes, which are still due, even though if you are impacted by the wildfires, there is an opportunity to not accrue penalties for that. One of the things that we did with our staff is we sent resources to all of the disaster recovery centers, the Pasadena, Altadena, and West LA disaster recovery centers, and we continue to do so. We updated our website and Nextdoor posts to provide taxpayers with county department resources related to affected parcels. Next. Now, as Assessor Prang noted earlier, on January 16th, after the wildfires, the governor issued an executive order. This executive order essentially covered 18 zip codes, which that's a big area that was really greater than the fire perimeter, but it really was to protect any potential property owner that had impacted property. And this is about 200,000 properties. We do note that there's approximately 23,000 properties that are either damaged or severely destroyed in the fire perimeters. One of the things that we did in our office is also we developed an adjusted tax bill insert, and the adjusted tax bill insert is in response to when the county assessor has completed with their their work to reduce the values for those properties that are impacted, to provide guidance as far as any penalties or concerns about paying penalties, right? Essentially, what the governor's executive order does is it extends not the deadline to pay the property taxes, but it suspends the penalties until April 10th, 2026. And because this was a very complex thing for us to be able to process, we actually created an efficient and operational change to our systems so that we could delay the accrual of the property tax penalties. So that way, we both protect the property owners that are in the zip codes, as well as protect county resources, so that we don't have to go back and make changes. It's going to be an automatic process for those folks. In addition, we updated our public inquiries page so that the taxpayers who go on our website and have questions that they submit to our office, they can select wildfires and they can submit those questions. We have case managers that will gravitate to those requests and inquiries, and we'll be able to expedite responses for those. And what are our ongoing efforts? So, our offices are primarily handled here at the Hall of Administration in downtown LA. So we provide telephone services. We have a telephone service center. We have a front counter, email support to provide answers and resources. One of the things we did is we extended our call center phone hours for holidays such as Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, and we found that to be very successful. We got really good feedback from the public for that. We also support the assessor's office, their efforts by referring and educating impacted property owners on the importance of filing an MNC claim. The Misfortune and Calamity claim is really what they need to be doing. In addition, we continue to staff the disaster recovery centers. Now they're limited to the Altadena site and the West LA site. At those sites, we also provide PDFs of printed tax bills, because we know that property owners may have lost their documents. So we're able to provide printed copies of tax bills. We're also able to email them. And so that way they can have those for their records. One of the things that my staff are doing is to assist with step-by-step online payment assistance and education. This is very important because a lot of people are still not familiar with making online payments, and we want to make sure that this is provided, because it's really simple. It's safe. Avoid the stamp. We always say save time, save money, pay online, and it's really something that we want people to take advantage of. In addition, we ensured that our business license staff are available to assist impacted business owners, delaying deadlines for the first-time applicants and existing licensees. We are also waiving late fees for late renewals, and the Board of Supervisors approved to temporarily remove restrictions for short-term rental operators. Now, here's some resources that we have online. Primarily, it's the FAQs I mentioned earlier on the emergency implications to property owners, in particular. The need and the importance to file the MNC claim, the Misfortune Calamity claim. I have a link here also for our penalty cancellation requests. We have developed a drop-down for the wildfire specifically. So 4985.2 is the Revenue and Taxation Code section that allows the tax collector to cancel penalties if a taxpayer encounters a situation beyond their control. And the wildfires were exactly that. So we labeled it wildfires so that those are directed to our staff and are expedited. But as I mentioned earlier, the governor's executive order did exempt that, did suspend those penalties for any property taxes that are due in 2025. Lastly, can you back up one slide? Yeah, lastly, I want to mention our public inquiry site. So our public inquiry site is really where we would like taxpayers to submit questions. You know, we get inundated with calls and you know, our staff, you know, 30,000 calls a month and all the communications we get. It's much easier and to expedite a response through our case management system. So our public inquiries site on our website is the best way to contact us, get a response. And if it involves the assessor's office, auditor, controller, we're able to work with our partners on a much more you know, simpler and expedited basis. And these are other ways to contact us. We're located at the Hall of Administration, downtown, first floor lobby. These are our hours of operation, essentially Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And our phone numbers are listed. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jojo, for your presentation. We appreciate your collaboration with us during this webinar. All right, and so up next, we have a presentation from the Auditor Controller's Office. We have Paul Bernal here with us. Thank you, Paul. You're on mute, Paul. Thanks.
I'm here. Good evening. My name is Paul Bernal. I'm with the Department of the Auditor Controllers. I'm the manager of the Property Tax Division's Public Service and Refund section for the Auditor Controllers. I just wanted to kind of briefly, next slide, please. I just wanted to briefly explain what our duties are with the Auditor Controllers. Our main responsibility is to receive assessment rolls from the Department of the Assessors annually. We are also responsible for establishing the tax rates, which composed of the 1% general tax levy under Prop 13. We also compile and calculate the voted indebtedness portion of that tax rate. And we also receive direct assessments from all taxing entities and agencies. We compile those direct assessments tax rates to the assessment roll, and we extend the roll to the treasurer tax collectors for collections. Upon collections, the funds are returned back to the auditor controllers, and our responsibility is also to apportion the funds to all taxing agencies, which is generally the county, the cities, school districts, water districts, all entities that place direct assessments on the tax bills. Since we place thousands and thousands of direct assessments on annual tax bills, we've reached out to the affected areas to speak with 35 assessment agencies to see if they would authorize any reductions in the direct assessment agency charges for each individual charge. They would either partially reduce, totally cancel, or they may not change at all. But we've reached out to these agencies to see if they were able and considering granting some relief due to the fires. Next slide, please. Okay. The direct assessment agency phone numbers, as Sergio mentioned on his tax bills, if you need to reach out to those direct assessment agencies, there are line items for each direct assessment charge with their telephone number. In reference to the direct assessments, the auditor cannot make any changes to those. Those are simply generated at the start of the year by those particular taxing entities. Decline in values for relief that is granted will come to the Department of the Auditor Controllers from the assessors. We will then make any adjustments to the tax bills by reducing the assessments, applying the tax rates, and also adjusting any direct assessments that have been partially reduced, removed, creating adjusted tax bills or refunds. If the taxes have been paid in full, the auditor will process refunds both manually and automated. Our first batch of refunds is going through the system. We probably won't complete all, but there's a large percentage that are running through our automated system. We have to review the payments through the treasurer tax collector system to determine what's the payment status and kind of give us the go to either adjust the bill or generate a refund. When refunds are generated, they're generated in an automated system. What will happen is that if any refund that is under $5,000 will be issued to the assessee of record. The R&T code, which is a revenue taxation code, allows us to issue to the assessee of record under $5,000. If any refunds exceed $5,000, we have to manually verify proof of payment and issue the refunds to the payee of taxes. If you have an impound account, all impound transactions that come through the treasurer tax collectors, refunds will be issued to the lender that made the payment. And that basically kind of concludes the auditor's process in this tax bill adjustments or refunds.
Thank you, Paul, for being here with us today. And Paul will be available for questions, so please stick around if you have any questions about the Auditor Controller's Office. And up next, we have the Department of LA County Planning. With us, we have Nathan Merrick. Nathan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. And first and foremost, thank you to the Assessor's Office for inviting us here today. Seriously appreciate it. My name is Nathan Merrick. I am a planner with our disaster recovery team, managing the disaster recovery efforts for the unincorporated communities here in LA County. As far as our overview for my presentation today, first I'm going to go over the disaster recovery framework as it relates to rebuilding as well as temporary housing. Also, I will provide resources related to how to contact us, how to reach us, and how to find this information that I'm presenting today in a public forum as well. Next slide, please. First and foremost, as we start to talk about the disaster recovery framework, I want to touch on temporary housing, which relates to utilizing RVs, manufactured homes, and mobile homes on a temporary basis while you're working to rebuild your permanent primary unit. The regulations associated with temporary housing can be found in Title 22 of the Los Angeles County Code, which is the land use and zoning code here for LA County. Specifically, you'll want to look at section 22.256.040. Some of the important development standards associated with temporary housing include the maximum square footage associated with that temporary housing, where it needs to be placed on the lot in question, what that temporary housing needs to contain, when the temporary housing must be removed from the property. And just to be clear, in addition to Title 22, we are also getting state executive orders, county directives, and other authoritative motions and things of that nature that may affect what is otherwise being discussed today, right? So it's important to mention that while we do have this initial framework in place, it is subject to change based on what's happening at the state and local level. Next slide, please. This, I just wanted to show you that when you are ready to apply for temporary housing, we do have a process set up for you. If you do live in an unincorporated community within Los Angeles County, you would go to Epic LA and you would apply for what's called a county recovery temporary housing permit. Next slide, please. In addition to the temporary housing that I've just mentioned before, the state has issued executive orders related to the use of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, on an interim basis while you are working to rebuild the primary unit as well. The state executive orders indicate that, one, you can develop a new ADU on a property where a primary residence was damaged or destroyed. It also allows for, importantly, with respect to this idea of temporary housing, the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the ADU prior to getting your certificate of occupancy for a primary dwelling unit. In addition to the state executive orders, any new ADU that is proposed as interim or temporary housing does need to meet the development standards within Title 22, specifically within section 22.140.640. Next slide, please. Moving away from temporary housing, we are now going to talk a little bit about the rebuilding process. First and foremost, this idea of a like-for-like rebuild. Again, within Title 22, we have a very specific set of sections related to how to apply, what that application looks like, and the development standards associated with like-for-like rebuilds. Importantly, right, as we've been discussing here today, A like-for-like rebuild includes the rebuilding of what was there previously that was destroyed or damaged by the fires, with a potential for a 10% increase, right? So when we start talking about this idea of 110%, that relates solely to land use and zoning regulations and the waiving thereof, right? As has been discussed here tonight already, that does not relate to health and safety codes that are regulated by the Department of Public Health. It doesn't relate to the building code and regulations that are implemented by the Department of Public Works. It does not relate to fire code requirements as they are implemented by the fire department. And last but not least, the 110% standard also does not relate to property taxes, tax assessments, and the payment of those property taxes. In addition to Title 22, when we're talking about like-for-like rebuilds, again, we have state executive orders, we have local directives that are coming down that change these standards a bit. So again, I bring it up to say, please continue to check in with LA County Planning regularly to ensure that you have the most up-to-date information with respect to the regulations that are in play. Next slide, please. Again, here we have our disaster rebuild application through Epic LA. And if you are applying for a rebuild, you would apply for what is called a county recovery rebuild application. Next slide, please. Last but not least, if your project does fall outside of the like-for-like standards associated with disaster recovery and disaster rebuilds, you would be subject to all current regulations as they exist today. Those projects would still be expedited, would still be processed by our disaster recovery team, but we would need to process it as we normally would for any new development project that comes through our doors. Next slide, please. With respect to how you can reach us or how you can contact us for information and counseling, we have 2 offices currently open that are specifically related to getting people information about disaster recovery. First, the Altadena One Stop, which actually just opened on March 3rd, located at 464 West Woodbury Road, Suite 210 there in Altadena. It is open Monday through Friday from 9:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. and on Saturdays from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. That office will also be starting workshops by appointments next week on Monday. So that is also available on the Countywide Recovers website that I'll talk about in just a second. So you could sign up for appointments that way as well. For those of you associated with the Palisades Fire in the unincorporated community, specifically the Santa Monica Mountains Coastal Zone, you can go to the Calabasas workshops. They're at 26600 Agora Road in Calabasas. Those workshops are by appointment. Again, you can get to those appointments through the LA County Recovers website, and appointments are available Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 to 10:30 a.m. and on Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Next slide, please. You can also reach out to us by phone and by email to get your inquiries answered. If it is not convenient to go somewhere in person, you can email us directly at disasterrecovery@planning.lacounty.gov. And you can also reach us by phone at 213-974-6411. Next slide, please. And last but not least, I want to provide the online resources that we have available to everybody. The most robust and all-encompassing resource that you will find with respect to rebuilding will be recovery.lacounty.gov. You can go to our specific Department of Regional Planning disaster recovery webpage there. And also Public Works has a very robust website as well related to disaster response, and that's there on the screen also. Next slide, please. That is it for me. Again, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and I will stick around for any questions.
Thank you very much, Nathan. We appreciate LA Planning being a part of us today. All right, so we have concluded the presentations, but now we're moving forward to the frequently asked questions. So we asked you guys to please submit questions when you registered for the webinar, and we have them here. So we pulled the ones that really were being repeated, and we will have the panelists here answer your questions. So we begin.
Kimberly, before we go into those, there's a lot of really good questions. Some of them are very complicated. What I think we will do is we're going to take all of these questions that we may not get to them all tonight, but we will answer the questions in writing and we will post that on our website so that and we'll update our frequently asked questions document to reflect some of these questions, because I presume that they're being asked here this evening. There's lots of other people who have those questions as well.
That is true. Thank you very much, Assessor. So beginning with the first question, this is to be directed to our assessor staff here. What happens to my property's assessed value when and if I rebuild my home?
I guess I can take that question. So we're in the process of lowering values based on the amount of damage, from partially damaged to complete destruction. We anticipate that we will be done processing most of these reductions by the end of May, although some of them will certainly will be done with everything in the burn area by the end of June. Your property assessment will be reduced if your home was totally destroyed. Let's say that your property was worth $1 million, $500,000 on the land, $500,000 on the building. The building will be zeroed out, and so you'll only be responsible for an assessment on the land. Although we are also looking at land values and making reductions on those as well. So the property will begin to be reassessed once you pull the permit and begin construction. The way the system works is we do a snapshot of where property is every January 1st. If you are 20% complete with your construction on January 1st of next year, you'll get an assessment for 20% of the restored value. Your previous tax base will be restored. You will not get a new current market-based tax rate. The taxes you're paying before the fire destroyed the property will be restored once the building is complete.
Thank you, Assessor. Moving on to the next question. This is for Sergio with TTC. Do I need to pay the outstanding installments of the annual secured property tax bill?
Let me unmute. No, the treasurer and tax collector recommends that you do not pay the outstanding installment under certain conditions. If you pay your property taxes directly to the TTC, filing a misfortune and calamity claim automatically qualifies you for the deferral of your property tax payments. Now, if you pay your property taxes through an impound account managed by your mortgage lender, you must contact them to explore options.
Thank you, Sergio. The next question will be for the assessor staff here. What happens after I file an MSC claim and it is approved? Scott, Nicole, Matthew, Jeff?
Nicole, do you want to take that one?
I'll jump in. So right now, once it's approved, we are currently in the process of determining what the actual relief will be. And so once we process that, we will be sending out notices. But in the interim, you will receive letters that tell you the status of your claim. So we'll confirm if we received it, and we'll let you know if there's any next steps that you need to take. We'll also share the next steps that we need to take. Once we process our assessment review, our relief, then what will essentially happen is, depending on whether or not you've made payments or not, you'll receive adjusted bills, and you'll either get reduced bills or you'll receive refunds based on our reduced values for relief.
Thank you, Nicole. For the next question, that will be directed back to TTC's office, and it states, will my property taxes be deferred if my mortgage lender pays my property taxes through an impound account and I file an MSC claim? Thank you, Sergio.
Sure. So the answer is no. The filing of an MNC claim only requests the assessor to reassess the value of the property damaged or destroyed by the calamity. After the property owner files the MNC claim, the treasurer and tax collector will issue an adjusted annual secured property tax bill. We recommend that you contact your mortgage lender to discuss available options for this.
Thank you. And the next question also goes back to you, so don't go too far. What happens if I already paid the first installment or both installments of the annual secured? Did I just see that? Should I file an M&C claim? Sorry about that. All right. This goes back to the assessor team. What is the timeline of the M&C process? What can I expect if I already filed?
I can take that question. So beginning in early to mid-April, we will begin our reassessments. You will be receiving a series of notifications from us, both in terms of letters. If you filed a claim with us and we have your email address, we will also be emailing you information as we get it. But our assessments will come in April and extend, as Assessor Prang said, through May and June. We do have some assessments that will need additional information from you, and we will let you know when we need that. But you can expect for sure that we'll receive those assessments. You'll receive notification of those assessments beginning in April, and then depending upon the timing, you'll receive adjusted tax bills from the tax collector or refunds, whichever situation applies to you. And I don't know the exact timing after we reassess those, but and Sergio can maybe address that. But you can expect all of that to happen, I believe, before June for the most part.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And back to our team. How much can I rebuild? And this is regard to the 110% versus 120% confusion that we've been seeing a lot.
This is really confusing. And Scott, if you could help explain this, it would be helpful.
Sure. And Nathan talked about this a little bit earlier about the 110% expedited permitting process. This is specific to the permitting process and is quite common. For us, we have two standards, and they're shown here in the blue and green boxes. One is substantial equivalence, which is basically the size. If you build to the like size that you had before, we will not reassess the property. And but if you go beyond the original size, then we will reassess just for that addition, just for that additional new construction. The other standard that we have is 120% of value. So we take the value of the property, the full market value of the property just before the fire. That's the 100%. And you take the value at the time that you rebuild and move in to the rebuild or the time you're able to use the rebuilt property. And that's where the standard would be applied to the 20%. And that's a value for value comparison, not a size for size comparison. Anything over that extra 20% will then be reassessed at full market value.
It's important to note, though, that even at the 120% of value, the standard for size is still substantial equivalence. There is no difference in the standard at which we apply to those. And quite frankly, the scenario in the middle is the one that is provides the best options for property owners. We don't think the 120% will be very valuable to very many, and it's obviously it's more restrictive than our standard Misfortune Calamity program, which is the like for like represented by that middle part of this chart.
And if I can just add one more thing, Assessor Prang, it's just so that you know, we will apply both standards, and you will be getting the relief that is the maximum relief that will go under either standard. So we will do the both standards, and the one that's best in your best interest, we will apply.
Thank you, Scott. And just going back to question number 5. Oops. All right. So this goes back to Sergio with TTC. What happens if I already paid the first installment or both installments of the annual secured property tax bill? Should I file an M&C claim? Thank you, Sergio.
Yes, so yes, absolutely, you should file an M&C claim. That should be completed even if one or both installments have been paid. Once your M&C application has been approved, the auditor controller will recalculate the secured property taxes, and the TTC, our office, will issue an adjusted annual secured property tax bill. Any reduction in the property's assessed value will result in a reduction in the property taxes amount property tax amounts owed. The auditor controller will then refund the difference between the original property tax amounts paid and the adjusted property tax amount owed.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue to the next question that we have here. And that is, how will refunds or adjustments work if I've already paid? This is for Paul.
Yes, as briefly Sergio mentioned, the auditor controller will recalculate the tax bill based on the new revised assessment. Once that happens, we will take a look at the payment history to determine how much has been paid to the property. If there is an overpayment, the auditor controller will issue a refund. And if it's underpaid, we will send out data to the tax collectors for an adjusted tax bill.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to Nathan for the question of, what is temporary housing? Will it be allowed, and where would it be allowed? Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you again, Kim. Yes, temporary housing, like mentioned earlier, is an RV, a mobile home, a manufactured home, and also, like we talked about, potentially an accessory dwelling unit utilized as housing in association with a previously destroyed primary dwelling unit that was destroyed in these fires. Temporary housing is absolutely allowed for a period of 2 years after the date of the emergency declaration, or until your certificate of occupancy is obtained for the rebuilt primary dwelling unit. As far as where temporary housing is allowed, temporary housing is generally allowed to be placed on a private property, so long as that property had a dwelling unit prior to the fire and that dwelling unit was destroyed or damaged by the fires. Other opportunities may be forthcoming, again, based on new state executive orders and local directives that may come down. Additionally, I just wanted to touch on a question that was shown in the Q&A related to this idea of the requirement that temporary housing be placed on a developed portion of your property. In general, that is the case, but when we talk about a developed portion of your property, we are not just talking about, right, the foundation footprint or something like that, because we certainly understand that your primary dwelling unit is going to go back there, right? So when we talk about putting temporary housing on a developed portion of your property, we're also talking about things like patios, for example, driveways, for example, right? Any existing area that was previously developed, we would be able to authorize the temporary housing in that location.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, this goes back to our assessor team. What is the relationship between the application for reassessment of property damaged or destroyed by misfortune or calamity and the decline in value review that's authorized by Proposition 8?
Nicole, can you walk us through this one?
I will do my best, Assessor Prang. So essentially, we have two different types. Obviously, for the misfortune and calamity, this is based on an event, which would be the fire events. And in terms of a decline in value, when we're talking about these, this is essentially relief that we look at that is essentially as of the lien date, which is as of January 1st. And the difference would be essentially a lot of times when we look at the fire properties, we can see that they have damage, they've been destroyed, but sometimes there may be other factors that are impacting that property. Let's say, for example, you may have a home that is standing. It was not directly impacted, but it may be impacts on the value of that property because of where it's situated. In these instances, there could be a misfortune and calamity decline in value that could be given to those other property owners.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Okay, so we are going to be moving towards the portion of the Q&A. Like I mentioned earlier, when you guys registered for this webinar, you had the opportunity of inputting a question. So the questions I will be reading now are a mix of pre-registered questions as well as the questions that you guys have been inputting into the Q&A chat. So we will get started. All right, so the first question.
Kimberly, before you start those, there's one question that's come up several
Please.
times. I was going to jump the line, but people are asking how they will know whether or not we received their application. Do we have a way for people to verify status? Scott, do Do you have an answer to that?
Yes, currently there is, we do not have a way to easily identify status other than to reach out to us and we can, and we can let you know. We are working on a status page. I don't know I don't know when that is going to be ready. But as soon as that's ready, we'll communicate out. But for now, if just so that you have again, go back to the general idea of what's happening. We will be the bulk. If you had your property damaged, the bulk of the properties that were damaged will be reassessed in the month of April. So you should be expecting that, and we will be sending notification and a number of letters to you coming up. So once we've done that, you'll know that for sure that something is happening with your reassessment.
And be assured that if you don't hear from us right away and verifying that we got your application, we are reevaluating all properties in the affected area with or without an application. The application is important because it gets you into our system. It helps us to make sure we know to contact you and just verifies that we've identified you. But just be patient. You will be getting information. You don't need to be concerned if you don't get confirmation in the short term.
Thank you, Assessor. That's a very important question.
I'm sorry, can I also just address another question I'm seeing quite commonly come up in the questions? Let me read out one of the questions that I'm seeing. It's a question of how the properties are going to be reassessed and whether the current damaged value is higher than the assessed value. If the current damage value is higher than the assessed value, you will still receive a reduction off of the assessed value for the damaged property. So the damage is realized as a percentage reduction against your base value, your property tax base value. And so even though the damage amount is greater, if you have a low assessed value, your damage amount is greater, you will still receive a reduction because it's realized as a percent reduction off of the value. I know that's complex, but just so that you know, you don't have to compare right now your assessed value with the actual damage amount. You will be getting a reduction regardless of what your actual assessed value is if your property has been damaged.
Thank you, Scott. Okay.
Scott, while you're on that topic, can you explain how we're going to be doing the land reductions?
Sure. So we've gone through a number of appraisal methodologies, standard appraisal methodologies to determine how we're going to do land, and we've been watching the sales. So as you probably know, some people have already begun selling their fully damaged properties just as vacant land, as is, and we're starting to see those sales come through both in the Palisades area and in the Eaton Fire area. So we are monitoring that. We will make a determination of what the right reduction in land value is pre-fire versus post-fire, and we will again apply that as a percent reduction against your land value. We treat the land and improvement value separately. So let's say your property is fully destroyed, we will reduce your improvement value 100%, and we will reduce your land value by the appropriate percentage reduction.
And Scott, while I have you, there's another question that's been in the Q&A section quite a few times. People are asking about when they rebuild, if they maintain this more or less the same square footage, but maybe add rooms or add bathrooms, how will that be affected?
So right, if you rebuild to the same square footage, we will just restore your Prop 13 base year value. And that's very straightforward. If you go beyond that, your square footage, let's say one of the examples was I had 2,000 square feet and I'm going to build to the 3,000 square feet. We will just assess that additional 1,000 square feet, not the full property, just the additional 1,000 square feet as new construction. So you can think of it as if there were no fire damage and you decided to add 1,000 square feet to the home, essentially the way we would reassess it in that case is how we would reassess that additional 1,000 square feet when you rebuild your property.
But just to put a finer point on that, if you rebuild and you move around some walls internally, we're going to be just focused on the overall square footage, not that the details about what's inside the house.
Well, that's
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Assessor. Thank you, Scott. Okay, so one question that we have here, this is for our Assessor team. Do I qualify for property tax relief if my home only has minor damage, but the homes next to me burned down?
The rules under Misfortune Calamity says that the damage has to exceed $10,000. You may qualify for the decline in value if your home has lost market value.
Thank you. All right, number 2, we have another question here. So we go, what happens to property taxes when previous added on or undisclosed rooms were not a part of the blueprint or recorded square footage?
Scott, that sounds like it's a good question for you.
So if you had we'll just do it this way. If you had square footage there that we did not show before, we can work with you to make sure that our records get updated correctly to the square footage you had before. However we do that, I know in many cases, if your property were fully destroyed, you might have lost information, blueprints, whatever you had, but we can look at it through aerial photography. We have other ways of doing it, but certainly if you feel we have the wrong square footage, you can reach out to us and we'll work with you to make sure that our records get updated.
Thank
Just
you.
going a little further on that one, Scott, what happens with if there was unpermitted structures on the property? Can they rebuild those?
So generally speaking, we will we reassess unpermitted structures. And so Nathan, you can close your ears on this one. So we do reassess unpermitted activities. So again, we will look at what you have, and if it's something we would have reassessed before, we will include it in our records as part of your base original property. And and when you rebuild for assessment purposes, it's completely different from the preventing purposes. So that's how we will treat it. And Nathan, I don't know if you want to follow up on that.
Yep, I did just want to chime in quickly, and thank you so much, Scott. And for our purposes as well, when we start talking about a like-for-like rebuild, we are authorized to utilize any and all records available to us. So like Scott said, even though the structure may have been unpermitted, if that structure showed up on a tax assessment at some time in the past, we would be able to utilize those assessor records for the purposes of a like-for-like rebuild. Also, let's just assume for the sake of argument that an unpermitted addition was not captured as part of the assessment process previously, so long as we can verify that that addition was there on the ground and was destroyed or damaged as part of the fire, whether it be through aerial photographs, Google Earth imagery, Google Street View, anything that we can utilize that shows that that structure or portion of structure was there prior to the fire, we would be able to utilize those records for the purposes of a like-for-like rebuild.
Thank you, Nathan. And actually, I see a follow-up question here that maybe I'm hoping you can help me answer. It says, how do we get a hold of our original blueprints?
Absolutely. No, thank you for that question. We would be the keeper of any plans on file at the county. Unfortunately, we came into existence, LA County Planning, in the mid-70s. So anything that was built prior to the mid-70s, it is unlikely that blueprints or plans would be available for those properties. However, what I recommend is that you reach out to disaster recovery at planning.lacounty.gov, and we can actually run a search on our end for the property owner or the person reaching out and look for any records that may be available.
Thank you very much. And now this one looks like it belongs to Sergio, a treasurer and tax collector. The question reads, are supplemental property taxes for the year 2024 due in April if I filed an M&C claim?
The answer is yes, but it also depends. If the M&C claim was for the 2025 wildfires, then definitely that is a yes. The taxes are due, but if the property was in the fire perimeter in the zip code area, and those taxes are due in the 2025 tax year or the calendar year, then they are protected as far as any penalty accruals. So the suspension of the penalties until April 2026 applies here. However, if it was a prior event, then that would be something that we would have to work with the assessor's office to figure that out. But I'm assuming we're talking about the current wildfires.
Thank you. And this next question, it says, how will property owners who hold onto their land for 2 to 3 years but have plans to build elsewhere be affected tax-wise?
I'll jump in, Kim. So it's possible that someone can do a Prop 19 base year transfer. In this case, if they are going to hold on to their property, there's two pieces of this. The question is, are they going to hold on to that other property and then sell? Or if they're going to hold on to that property and then just keep it. But let's say they hold on to their property for 2 or 3 years, and then they decide at that point in time they want to transfer their base year value. What we would do in that instance is we would look at the value of the property immediately before the fire. We would look at what they want to purchase. And if they do either of those things, they purchase and sell within 2 years, they can transfer the value to the new home. Now, if the value comparisons, if they buy something that's greater than, there'll be an adjustment in that tax base. So to reiterate, let me say that in a more simple way. You can go ahead and you don't have to immediately decide that you're going to transfer your base year value. But once you either purchase a property or you sell your property, then the 2-year clock is going to start. And at that time, you have 2 years to complete either the purchase or sale. We'll do a comparison between the values to see how much you're transferring over and if you get the lower tax base and if we need to make an adjustment or not. There's more information on our website that really goes into detail about the different types of base year transfers, but 2 years between the sale and purchase or purchase and sell is the key point.
And just to follow up on that, Nicole mentioned that there are other forms of relief that allow a base year value transfer under disaster. Props 50 and 171 also allow. It's longer than 2 years, but there are other constraints or restrictions on those particular types of relief. So this is one of those complicated areas where we actually have three ways to do it. And again, the best one that works for you is the one we will use. But we do have that information on our website, and certainly you can talk to one of our staff, and they can help walk you through that.
Thank you. That's very great information for the situation. I see a question here for the assessor team. How can I keep my assessed value while upgrading to current codes? Can I move the placement of my garage? Would this be with planning, assessor?
No, Scott, can you answer that question?
Sure. So again, the standard substantially equivalent. So if you're building to the same size, if you had a 400 square foot garage before, you have a 400 square foot garage now, whether you have whether it was detached before and it's attached now, it should not impact your reassessment at all.
Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, as Assessor Prang had said, it doesn't matter what the inside walls kind of look like. We're just looking at total square footage for the most part. Under that is substantially equivalent rule.
Thank you. That detail is important. All right. How is the value for a lot and destroyed home determined for a Prop 19 transfer outside of LA County?
I will jump in. So basically, we work with our county partners, and if the property is damaged, we have to look at immediately prior to the fire to determine what the fair market value is. And so if it's another county, we'll work together. They will provide, let's say in this case, it would be in LA County. we would determine what was the value of the property immediately before the fire. We would share that with the other county, and then they would do the comparison in terms of what was bought in the other county to see if our tax base just moves or if that tax base moves with some kind of adjustment to it.
Thank you, Nicole. I see here we have another question about Prop 19, so I'll select this one. How does transferring the lost property's base value under Prop 19 affect the rebuild process and reassessment of the new home? I think you touched on this a little bit, Nicole, but do you mind expanding again, please?
Yes, so essentially, there's, like you said, there's different types of relief, but I'm going to assume in this case that the person was going to go ahead and transfer their base share value. And if they sold it, then obviously at that point in time, we would take the price of the lot that now has a new owner. We look at the sales price. And then what would happen is any new construction that was built on that property will be taxed as fair market value, right? At this point in time, the owner who was impacted by the fire has taken their old base share value immediately prior to the fire and moved that out. So when the property is sold, again, we'd have the land value, and then as they constructed, we would be picking that all up as new construction. Because again, at this point, Misfortune and Calamity would not apply for the new owner. If there's other instances where they transferred the base and they retain the land, then at that point in time, they would transfer it over. They retain some base portion of it for the land value at that point in time, but then anything they built at that point would be built as new construction because they've already transferred that base to another property, and you can only have a base on one. So if you move it, it's gone from the previous one.
Thank you. Okay, so this one says, does building with better materials, for example, type 3 versus type 5, cause a reassessment? Does building with better materials, like for example, type 3 versus type 5, cause a reassessment?
This goes back, I'm going to jump in and my colleagues can jump in. This should not, if we're just talking about the quality of the materials, but again, it's substantially equivalent in terms of size, that should not cause a reassessment in the property, generally speaking.
Thank you. Okay, and then I believe you also covered this, but I'll bring it up because it came up again. What are the time limits for selling the lot and transferring the tax base to a new property?
So depending on the different types of relief that is given under Prop 19 for transfers of value, if we're talking about what is under, I hate to give Revenue to and Taxation Code section. I know you hate this too, Assessor Prang, but if we're talking about essentially the ones where people are selling the property, I'll put it in those terms. Then you're talking about, again, that 2 years from buying to selling or either one. If we're talking about some of the other types of relief that are available, if it's within our county and depending on other factors, it could be 5 years. And if we're talking about between counties, then it could be 3 years.
Thank you. And this one looks like it goes to Sergio with Treasurer and Tax Collector. Go ahead.
Nicole, just to clarify, with the Proposition 19, it doesn't matter the order, whether you sell or buy, it just has to be done, both of them need to be done within 2 years. Is that correct?
That's correct, Assessor Prang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assessor, for that clarification. And the one I'm seeing here, I think it goes to Treasurer and Tax Collector, and it reads, how are the impounded taxes on mortgage payments affected if I file an M&C claim?
Thank you for the question. So impounded taxes are not affected. However, we've been in contact with the large payment processors, and they've recommended that property owners contact their lender directly to seek relief. On our end, we're diligently working with Assessor and Auditor Controller to know the new values. As soon as we have that information, we'll be communicating that to the lenders, to the payment processors, so that they can then adjust their information accordingly. But obviously, this is going to take some time. So in the meantime, we do recommend that anybody with an impound account really contact their lenders to seek any kind of relief.
Sergio, I understand that many major lenders are being very helpful to people's property who was damaged. In the event that one of the questions was if their mortgage company gives them a hard time about their impound account and they need support, is there things we do? Do we provide like a letter to verify that this is a property that's been impacted by the fire so they can argue with their mortgage company?
We can, I mean, we can definitely try to assist in terms of reaching the payment processor. So we work closely with the two largest payment processors, and we can try to get that. They can be our liaison in terms of communicating with the lender. So this would be a good segue into taxpayers filing via our public inquiry site. If they can go to the public inquiry site on the TTC website and submit that specific question, then we can communicate that to the lender, and then that way they'll be able to connect with that taxpayer. But you know, that's obviously only if they're having a difficulty with their lender. But yeah, the payment processors, lenders are really actively trying to help.
Thank you. And then I see here, hopefully you can help me with this one as well. Sergio, it says Altadena residents have received multiple tax bills. They're not sure who to contact if they're getting past due notices. What do you advise homeowners to do in this situation? Sergio, I think you're on
Sorry, I
mute.
was muted.
No
So what we
worries.
advise is that property owners go to our public inquiry site. So that public inquiry site is where we need you to go there, upload any documents that you've received. So if you received multiple property tax bills that you're not sure about, if you can upload that information into our site, submit that, we will assign that to one of our case managers, and then we'll work with the taxpayer accordingly. So we'll communicate with the assessor's office, auditor, controller as necessary to be able to expedite any answers we can give them or any help, right? But especially if they haven't filed an M&C claim.
One of the things I wanted to add as well is there may be some confusion with property owners. In some circumstances, you may get a flurry of confusing notices from the county. The treasurer tax collector, the assessor, and the auditor are each guided by different regulations with different deadlines. There's certain things we do under normal processes at different times of the year. So it could be that you get a refund and a tax bill within close proximity, and that may not make sense, but we're sequentially resolving different things. Each department is resolving different things at different times. And we recognize that this is going to be very confusing. We will do our best to keep information up on our website and the property tax portal to let you know what this all means and to answer your questions as they come up.
If I can add, so the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, when we all work very closely together, whenever we get any kind of complaint of scams or anything like that the taxpayers receive, we refer that to the Consumer and Business Affairs, and they investigate that. So that's also something good for taxpayers to know.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that clarification. I believe this one goes to Nathan with LA Planning. After a house is rebuilt, what is the process to update the information with the county?
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. So as part of the rebuilding process, the end of that process includes a permit from the Department of Public Works, Building and Safety. And when a permit is pulled from Building and Safety, it is my understanding that that information will go off to a number of county agencies to ensure everything is updated on the county side. Also, because these rebuild applications are county-wide applications, meaning you submit one application and it goes to planning, the fire department, public health if necessary, and public works as necessary. All of those departments are also tracking these efforts and tracking these approvals. And so as soon as those approvals go out, those county records are automatically updated on those department sides.
Thank you very much for that response. And I see here, if I rebuild, I see this question a lot. So if I rebuild smaller than what I lost, does this affect my property tax? Someone from the assessor team?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. If I rebuild smaller than what I lost, does this affect my property tax?
So we will restore your, as you rebuild, we will restore your original base value. So it'll return to what the original factor base value was, as long as it's equal to or smaller than the in size to the original property.
Thank you very much. Okay, and this goes back to Sergio. How are property taxes and deadlines being adjusted due to the fires if the house was a total loss?
So we've been asked this question quite a bit. So property tax deadlines are not being adjusted. However, the filing of a misfortune and calamity claim will allow the deferral of the property taxes and any penalties. In addition, the executive order of January 16 further protects by suspending the penalties for fire victims until after April 10th, 2026.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, I see another one here. How exactly is the pre-fire home value established? I believe this is essential to understand how to properly baseline the 120% value. So how exactly is the pre-fire home value established?
So our certified appraisers at the Office of the Assessor will perform a standard appraisal as of the day before the fire, and that will be used as the baseline.
Thank you, Scott. Now, is there a time limit on the construction period? If it takes me 6 years to rebuild, will the assessment be kept as the same for the land value for 6 years?
So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to that response there, right? So if your property is fully destroyed and it takes you 6 years to rebuild, if your rebuild is in progress for 6 years, we will review the property for reassessment every January 1st in that 6-year period. And if we might restore, if you've built 20%, if you've rebuilt 20%, we might restore 20% of your original base value on that particular year. There is, when we go to those two standards, the substantial equivalent and the 120%, there is a timeline, or there is a time limit on the rebuild for the 120% rule, currently at 5 years. We are seeking legislation that would extend that for our fires, but currently that's 5 years. There's no limit on the substantial equivalent standard, and so that's not an issue.
Along that line, if I can add, one of the things that you'll probably want to know is that essentially the assessment clock starts ticking once a permit for rebuilding is issued. In the county, the assessor will, every January 1st, which is known as the lien date, determine the percentage of construction which has been complete. So if you get your permit in November and begin construction and you're 10% complete on January 1st, your assessment will begin to rise to reflect that 10% of value as of January 1st until it's completed.
Thank you, Assessor. Here we have, will a change in floor plan under the same square footage, example, splitting a large hallway bath into 2 baths, initiate a reassessment for the entire rebuild?
I think we've kind of addressed this one already. In the case of misfortune calamity, as long as the square footage is substantially equivalent to what was there, what goes on inside the walls will not be of concern to us. Although, just so you'll know that under normal circumstances, when there's not a natural disaster, moving around walls could subject you to reassessment. It will not in this case. Am I correct, Scott?
I'm sorry, Assessor Prang, I missed that very last part.
I said I was just trying to differentiate the fact that if they move around walls and reassemble rooms inside their substantial equivalent replacement, that's a little different standard that we would do under normal cases. If you pull a permit to add another bathroom within the same square footage, that could be subject to reassessment.
That's correct.
So it's a little different standard for this circumstance.
Thank you. And this next question has to do with property taxes that are impounded. It says that their mortgage lender is asking for a mortgage holder needs a letter from the assessor. Will we provide that?
I think that question was asked earlier, right?
About this is in the chat,
Yeah,
but
we raised that just a moment ago. If you have a mortgage lender who needs something from the county, from the tax collector, or from our office, we can provide that. I don't think that's been an issue to date, since most mortgage lenders have been pretty cooperative. But certainly, we will help you if you need it.
thank you. And I see here, if we submitted a property data change request, when will we be notified if that request was accepted? Property data change request.
I'll take that question. So on our property data change requests, we don't have a notification process built in for that. And generally, we're able to do those fairly quickly. If you've you can check our website. We do have property information at assessor.lacounty.gov to see if we've updated that to the correct square footage or correct bedrooms and bath, whatever it happens to be. But otherwise, you can check back with us. I have seen this question come up several times in the questions, we will review with our staff how that process is going, and we will look at a way of notifying you, especially if you filed a claim form with us. We can notify you by email. I will work on that and see if we can't get you notified when those come through. It is important on that point that in order to get those notifications, we do need you to file the claim, provide your email address, or register with us on the e-notification so that we have that contact information. But like I said, we don't generally now notify on the data change requests, but we'll work on something to get that done.
Thank you. And I see this question in the chat for Nathan. If you can I saw that you answered it, but if you can share it to the group out loud. What if someone wants to put a manufactured home on their site and it's permanent?
Absolutely. So a manufactured home could potentially be placed on the property in a permanent fashion. From a planning perspective, that would not be a problem. The big question is going to result actually from Los Angeles County Public Works, Building and Safety. We need to ensure that that structure meets building code requirements. But from a planning perspective, a land use and zoning perspective, the placement of a manufactured home on the property on a permanent basis would not be an issue for us.
Thank you, Nathan. And then Assessor, what constitutes that the rebuilding has begun for assessment? What constitutes the beginning of a rebuilding?
The issuance of a permit from either the city that you live in or the county planning department.
Thank you, Assessor. I see a question for Paul with the Auditor Controller's Office. Is there any relief with Hero Loan that is wrapped up in my property tax? My home is a total loss, including the upgrades with Hero Loan. Can you clarify more on that, please, Paul?
Yes, Hero, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hero loans are part of the direct assessments, and those would have to be directed directly with the Hero agency listed on your tax bill. Those are contracts that have been signed, usually for solar and improvements on the home. That would simply have to be answered by that particular agency, the Hero agency.
Thank you very much, Paul. I see here someone is asking for clarity. Can you clarify what you mean by substantial equivalence? Does that mean simply anything beyond the 120%? And the example they provide is, go ahead.
120% does not refer to size, that refers to value. A substantial equivalence means it's of a similar size and use. So if it was a single-family residential home at 1,200 square feet, you can build about 1,200 square feet and for a replacement single-family home. You can't replace it with a commercial property. There is a little bit of wiggle room in terms of substantial equivalence, what relates to the size, as long as it will be appraisal judgment. Probably if you're less than 5% bigger than what was there, that probably will qualify. If you build to the 110%, which is being allowed for the expedited permitting process, that will be outside our discretion.
Thank you, Assessor. And I see two questions for you, Nathan. If I wanted to construct a permanent ADU, so permanent, no more temporary housing, in advance of primary dwelling construction to live in, would I need a permit for that?
You would need a permit for that. We can absolutely help with that, and that absolutely would be allowable. So we actually would classify that as a subset of temporary housing. I hesitate to use the term temporary, right, because it is a permanent ADU. So one thing that we do talk about with respect to these types of projects is the idea of interim housing, right? You're putting a accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, permanent on the property, but you're utilizing it on an interim basis while you're rebuilding the primary unit. Yes, we have an application process for that, and yes, we can help with that.
Thank you. And to follow up, can you share the website out loud and the question goes, how could I apply for disaster rebuild allowances?
Absolutely. So you would apply through Epic LA, and I want to get that link over so that it can be posted by Ted. So I'm going to go ahead and send that over so that it can be posted in the chat.
Thank you. So everyone will have a chance to see where to apply for a disaster rebuild allowance. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Ted.
And one thing, Kim, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to indicate right again, because I do see some questions coming in regarding incorporated cities. In particular, there were a few related to the city of Malibu. I just want to make clear, right, that everything that I am talking about here today is associated with unincorporated communities within LA County. For incorporated cities, the city of Malibu, the city of Los Angeles, city of Pasadena, Sierra Madre, right? They have their own sets of regulations and rules related to disaster recovery, and you would need to talk to those jurisdictions that your property is within in order to get those answers, right? So I just want to provide that clarity here, that my answers that I'm providing are associated with properties located within the unincorporated communities of Los Angeles County.
Thank you. And can someone please share, it says, how do we know if our zip code is in the included zone for the governor's executive order? Where would be the best place for residents to review that information for the zip codes?
So we have that information on our website. I did post it on as a response to one of the questions. But it's on our website in the news site, and it's also in our frequently asked questions for the filing of a misfortune and calamity claim. You can also go directly to the governor's executive orders, and we can provide those links.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And back to you, Nathan. In terms of commercial property, does the like for like only apply for residential, or can it apply also for commercial properties for my business?
It applies to commercial properties, industrial properties, anything that was damaged or destroyed by the fires that's located within an unincorporated community of Los Angeles County would qualify for this idea of like for like rebuilding.
Thank you. And I have a question here about height. This says here, following up on the height requirement, if we had a sloping roof that was 10 feet high at the highest and 8 feet at the lowest, could we rebuild up to 11 feet in height to maintain like for like? Or would that be affected?
Yes, so the way that we measure height is actually the plumb line distance at each distinct point along your roof line, right? So if you have a sloped roof that looks like this, we would take our height measurement at each distinct point along that roof line, plumb line distance all the way down to grade, right? So let's just assume for the sake of argument that we have a sloped roof that is 10 feet at the top and 8 feet near the eaves, you would be allowed to extend, right, or include a height addition, right, up to 11 feet at that top portion, right, 10% of 10 feet. Towards the eaves though, right, if it's at 8 feet in height, you would be allowed to go up, right, to all of a sudden 8.8 feet, right? So we take 10% off of that 8 feet and you'd be able to go up from there, right? So we do have to take that height measurement at each distinct point along that roof line.
Thank you. And we have a question here that's comparing programs. Is it more advantageous to use property 19 under disaster relief, or if I am eligible by my age of 62?
Nicole, can you?
Yes, no, yeah, essentially for those, if they're going to sell the property, they're basically similar in terms of how we apply them. So,
Thank you. And we have a specific question here that says, if my home only received smoke damage from the fires, should I still file an M&C claim?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Right, if the damage exceeds $10,000, we recommend that you file an M&C claim to get your properties reassessed to a lower value. All right. We have here, thank you all for your
I'm
questions.
sorry, I just wanted to add on that one. In those instances, it would be very helpful if the owner is able to provide us documentation in terms of the damage for our review.
Thank you, Nicole, for that update. We have here a question about 2 homes and 1 floor. So it says, if we rebuilt a formerly 2-story home to a 1-story home with the same square footage, is that still like for like?
So the issue with that, right, if we think about this as a 2,000 square foot home, you had 1,000 square feet on the first floor and 1,000 square feet on the second floor. You take off that second floor and you want to add that 1,000 square feet elsewhere. When we talk about like for like and 110% of what existed before, we're talking 110% of, right, square footage, height, and then the structure has to be located in substantially the same location as it existed before. So if you take off that second story and your intention is to move around that, right, and put additional square footage on the first floor, we have to start talking about whether or not you're within substantially the same location. I know that that is sort of an ambiguous term, and that's one thing that I wanted to bring up as well in relationship to another question in the chat. And that is to say substantially the same location is currently being worked out by our department, and our intention is to provide an interpretation memo associated with what that means. So this is another one of those instances where I say, as of now, it does need to stay in substantially the same location. However, what that means will be fleshed out hopefully sooner than later. So please do continue to check back with us at planning to ensure that you get the most updated and accurate information as you possibly can.
That actually raises a good question. Scott, maybe you could help. If in the scenario that was suggested, that may not qualify for regional planning, but how does that apply for us? It's the same square footage. Would we view that as substantial compliance from assessment perspective?
Yeah, I apologize. I was answering the question. I missed the original scenario.
The original question is if they had a 2-story home of 2,000 square feet and they decide to rebuild it as a 1-story structure, so it would have presumably would have a larger footprint on the land. Would that, for assessment purposes, still meet our substantial equivalence standard? It may, Nathan was saying it may not meet the standards for regional planning, but I'm just wondering if it would for assessment purposes.
Yes, I believe so. If one of the other SMEs on the line, if they can chip in.
I would agree, Scott. I think in that case, it's similar in size and utility.
Yeah. So to that point, right? We're just looking at similar in size. Nicole did mention utility. If you were, we have some latitude in terms of utility. If it's a residential property before and it's a residential property after, that's equivalent utility. If you went from residential to commercial or commercial to residential, then the utility would change. But for the most part, we're just looking at the size overall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see a question here for the Auditor Controller's Office. If I pay off my mortgage and the impound account is closed, how do I reestablish my tax account so that I receive all information going forward?
This is Paul from the auditors. Generally, your impound account lender will notify the treasurer tax collectors and not to place their address for billing purposes. So you should have been receiving an information statement as you had a mortgage impound account, and that will cease to take place, and then you just be receiving your own property tax bill.
And just to add to that, you should also ensure that the mailing address is current. And so many times the mailing address of the property owner is not current, and because, you know, while the mortgage company was paying the property taxes, the taxpayer may have not known that they had an incorrect mailing address. So it's always good when that mortgage is paid off and or their impound account was closed, to make sure that your property tax bills are going to the right address.
And let me just reemphasize, you can go onto my website, assessor.lacounty.gov, and you can set up an assessor's e-service account with your property, and you can update your mailing address there. It is very important to note that the tax collector will send the bill to the address that we have on record. And if your home has been is destroyed or cannot be occupied, and we don't have a current mailing address, it's going to go to that address of the damaged property. But it's very easy to change it on our website, and I urge you to do that. While you also, again, to repeat, I recommend that you also sign up for the homeowner alert to protect yourself against fraud during this difficult transition.
Thank you, Assessor. I see someone had a question that I would just want to say out loud the response, that when you're getting information from the assessor's office, we will most likely contact you via mail. We understand that a lot of people are getting spam phone calls, and you may not be answering those calls because you're unaware, or it could be fraudulent calls. So we most likely will contact you via mail. Assessor, would you like to add something about fraud prevention for the office?
I would just say that if you get a phone call and you're not certain, just hang up and call our office directly and verify that the phone call did come from us. But again, please sign up for the homeowner alert. Simple to do on the main page of our website.
Thank you. That is a great resource that's always available online 24/7. Now, I believe I've gotten a good reach of our questions that were asked, so thank you very much. I'm gonna ask the panelists here with me. Is there anything that you would like to add to share information to the audience?
One thing I could add, in addition to also updating your address with the assessor department, you can also please make sure that you update your mailing or forwarding address with the postal service. A lot of times we will send out refunds exceeding $5,000 to what's on the check. So as long as your updated information is listed with the U.S. Postal Service, it can be forwarded.
Thank you very much for that, Paul.
And
Sergio? Yeah, I see you
right,
there.
so for the treasurer tax collector, you know, we have some really great self-service options on our website. It's part of our public inquiry site. I recommend all property owners to go there. You can view, you know, you can pay your property taxes online, which is what we encourage. You can view payment history. You can view copies of your property tax bill. We have secured property tax bills and unsecured property tax bills there now. You can file a request for penalty cancellation. Although, as I mentioned in the chat, anybody who is in the zip codes, just to reiterate, you do not have to file a penalty cancellation request. As long as you are in the zip code, your property is located there, you will not accrue penalties. We do encourage you to pay the taxes if you can, but if your property was destroyed, you do not have to. So you have until the assessor is done with their work, and then the auditor controller completes their recalculation. We issue the adjusted bill, and then that's when it's your turn to pay. But you do have until April 10th, 2026. And so that just encourage people to go to our website. We have a lot of great information there.
Thank you. Nathan, I see that you answered this question, but I think it's important since we've been talking about it a lot. The question is, who is making the like-for-like determination and definition when it comes to rebuilding?
Absolutely. So the like-for-like determination is made by planning at the application stage. And what we do is we utilize the existing records that are on file. Again, not only on the county side, right, with assessor records, building permit records, planning records, things of that nature, but also due to state executive orders, it has been opened up to things like aerial photographs, oblique pictometry, which we can utilize to get a rough estimate of height. We can utilize Google Earth, Google Street View, any resource that we have available to us, we will be able to utilize to establish that baseline with respect to like for like.
Thank you. And since I have you here, you stated that it will be free of charge to get copies of your records. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. From a planning perspective, if you submit a request for records that we have or hopefully have on file, we would look for those records, retrieve those records, digitize those records, and provide those records free of charge.
Thank you. So as you can see, LA Planning is here for you, here to provide copies to help you rebuild in this during these difficult times. Do we have any other panelists who would like to add something to this webinar, please?
Just a question for clarification. I'm looking at our website right now. So to file for the homeowner alert, they would go to my account. Is that correct?
Are you talking about Epic LA?
No, the assessor's homeowner alert.
The assessor's homeowners alert assessor is available on the assessor's website. I put it in the chat now a few times, but I will. I
want to give some verbal instructions. I'm looking at the website now. Would that be under my account?
It would be under News and Information Homeowner Alert Service.
Thank you.
And I will add that it is a free service that we offer. All right, so we don't have any other panelist input. I will take it back to you, Assessor.
Thank you very much, Kimberly, and thank you to all of you who've spent part of your evening with us. I hope that this information has been useful. I want to thank the regional planning, the tax collector, and the auditor controller as well as all the staff in the assessor's office for joining us. We are going to put all the questions onto the website. Please reach out to us if you need further clarification. We know that a lot of this stuff is complicated, and there's a number of different departments that each have a different piece of the puzzle. We want to make certain that we are helpful to you and helping you get through this very difficult time. So thank you again for joining us, and please keep in touch if we can be of assistance.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing everyone next Saturday at the Resource Fair in Duarte. All right, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Kim, and if you don't mind, I'm just gonna add if questions are still coming in, just so that members of the public are aware that we are gathering all of these questions that have not only been submitted, but that have been answered. And a updated FAQ will be available on the assessor's website following this webinar with those questions that were submitted tonight, in addition to those questions that were submitted during the registration process. So if you still have questions, or you think your question wasn't fully addressed, you can check back on the assessor's website here in the next week to see that new updated FAQ, which will be available on the disaster relief page of our website. In addition, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the website as well, so that you can share with your neighbors, your family, other community members who were not able to make it tonight. So please check back on those websites for updated information.